Messages from a dying alien. Coming up, a UFO crashes in a forest in Sweden, directly in front of 3 witnesses, and the fatally injured extraterrestrial gives instructions to safely dispose of his body just before he dies. This alleged case takes place in the Gulf of Bothnia, Sweden, way back in July 1955 at around 6 AM. 3 lumberjacks are chopping down trees close to a river when they hear a peculiar sound. They're not sure what to make of it and believe a wild animal could be responsible. They continue with their work when a short time later they observe a cigar-shaped craft through the trees. One of the lumberjacks describes the craft as moving in a haphazard way. He describes believing at first that it was a small airplane which had lost its wings. The lumberjack stated that he felt sure the craft was in trouble and was trying to make an emergency landing. Next, he noticed that the craft appeared to be heading in the direction of the river, very close to where the lumberjacks were working. They stopped what they were doing as all of their attention was now focused on what appeared to them to be a distressed aircraft without wings. They were not able to see the craft the whole time because the trees was blocking their view. But a short time later, they witnessed an incredibly bright light. So bright in fact that the sunlight almost disappeared, and they believed the craft hit the ground a short distance away from them, either close to or on the riverbank. What is more bizarre is the witnesses also claim that they could see through the trees, almost like an X-ray. Next, some sort of vacuum was in progress, which was pulling leaves and branches across the ground, and the 3 men had to hold their balance carefully in order not to suffer the same fate. They also described the normal forest sounds, which the lumberjacks were so familiar with, had completely stopped. Shortly after this, the environment returned to normal, and the 3 men decided to investigate the aircraft crash. Much to their surprise, they were not able to find any wreckage. So although they were somewhat shocked to how their morning was unfolding, they decided to get back to work, but before they could do so, one of the men spotted something rather unusual. He noticed a humanoid figure laying on the ground. "Here's a dwarf dressed in uniform," one of the lumberjacks announced. It did not take them long to assume that this small guy in uniform must be the pilot of the doomed craft. They came to the belief that perhaps the vehicle may have crashed into the river, and perhaps the bright light was some sort of ejector seat technology, freeing the pilot away from the damaged craft. The 3 lumberjacks gathered around the body of the alleged being. They said he was only about 4 foot tall and he appeared completely lifeless. One of the lumberjacks went to touch this unknown creature, when suddenly the creature moved away and said in perfect Swedish,
"Do not touch me. It will only bring you difficulties. Now, you know who I am."
Next, the 3 men felt a great sense of calm come over them. By now, the 3 men realised that this was no dwarf. They stated that the entity was very well built, with broad shoulders, and his skin was slightly yellowish. His eyes were deep-socketed and black, without any white around them. His uniform was described as a strange reddish metal which clung to him like glue. He wore a belt with a large glowing buckle. Only his head and hands were visible. Despite the 3 being completely unfamiliar with this creature, it was obvious to them just how bruised and wounded he was. One of the witnesses described his shoes as ribbed and similar to caterpillar tracks off an army tank. As we have heard in other alleged cases involving the Greys, these shoes allow the wearer to move forwards and backwards at reasonable speeds without moving their feet. Human beings' closest equivalent is perhaps electric scooters or air wheels. This entity kept smiling at them as if to reassure them not to panic, but it was clear to the 3 that whoever or whatever he is, he is seriously injured. This entity then stated that he is fatally hurt and went on to say,
"It is because of my clothing I can stay with you a while. Internally, I am destroyed."
Next, this entity pulled out a small device from his pocket and pressed some buttons on it, then he threw it several feet away. This entity at this point is thought to believe that one of the lumberjacks was going to pick it up.
"Don't touch it.
The being insisted.
I have set it so my kind don't come looking for me."
It appeared that this being was in great pain, and 2 of the 3 lumberjacks walked off together back into the forest. The remaining lumberjack believes the entity was responsible, perhaps telepathically, for the 2 men doing this in unison. It is claimed that the remaining lumberjack had a 2-hour conversation with this being before he died, but much of the alleged conversation has not been revealed by the witness. However, here is what's known. He claimed he come from a constellation we call the Eagle, and several different species have been visiting the Earth for many centuries. He also divulged that some of these species are keeping a permanent surveillance on humanity. The entity would hand over to the lumberjack a strange bag. He was told by the entity that once he dies, he should be placed into this bag with the help of the other 2 lumberjacks, then taken to the river where the bag and contents will disappear. He was also told that it was imperative that everyone washes as soon as possible afterwards so they don't get ill. Next, the lumberjack could see that the being was in his final moments. His breathing became heavy. He quietly mumbled to himself a few short sentences, as if saying a final prayer. Then this entity passed away. At this point, the other 2 lumberjacks returned to the scene, and the being's body was placed into the bag by the 3 lumberjacks, just as instructed. This bag had a strong, sulphur-like smell, and it seemed to be harmful to their skin, like a burning sensation on their hands. The 3 carried the bag down to the river and placed it in the water. As soon as they did so, the water around the bag began to bubble. They believed some form of chemical process was going on, and the bag appeared to be dissolving away. Just a short number of minutes later, there was nothing left at all. Despite the 3 men working together for several more years, they chose not to talk about their strange experience they had that day. So, this encounter took place over 65 years ago, and the witness, to my understanding, has never elaborated on most of the conversation that is said to have taken place, and as far as I know, he has never attempted to make any financial gain from his alleged experience. The details of this case were taken by a researcher named Fontaine in Sweden during a UFO conference more than 3 decades after the alleged event is said to have taken place in the mid-1950s, and to my knowledge, the witness has never spoken publicly about it again. We make content on all aspects of the paranormal and unexplained. If you enjoyed this content, please consider liking, subscribing, and take a look at my other content. Thanks for tuning in.